Hello and welcome to Storyboard18, Suresh. It's lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you, Darshan.
Let me begin by asking you about how 2022 has fared for Nestle so far. How are you sustaining all the momentum in consumption that you've gathered through the pandemic, especially for flagship brands like Maggie?
Well, I think, Darshan, it's a very good question. And one of the striking features of 2022 has really been the unrelenting inflation on commodities that we have faced right from the word go. So really about 9 or 10 of our top 13 commodities that we procure as a company have crossed their 10-year highs. So in some sense, the cumulative inflation in the last 3 years, 2019, 20, and 21, has in a sense been met or surpassed by the inflation that we are facing today in 2022. So really the commodity inflation is something that is here with us, and that is something that we have to cope with. On the other hand, I must say that the demand for our brands and our mainstream brands has been fairly robust. After the gradual kind of opening up that one is seeing across markets, the out-of-home business is also coming back in full glory. Most of our portfolio are doing reasonably well. But I think one thing that we have to really combat in the short to medium term is commodity inflation. How do you deal with it in terms of efficiencies, in terms of effectiveness, and also in terms of pricing? So those are some of the concerns that one is combating at this point in time.
Let's talk a little bit about Maggie right now. Maggie is an iconic brand. It's a 4-decade-old brand that has been through some rough times. We saw it a few years ago during the lead crisis when it came back from the brink and had this turnaround in dramatic fashion. Tell me, what are you doing to unlock the next level of growth for a brand like Maggie now?
For me, the way I look at Maggie is really a classic example of a brand that has been mass customized even before the word had been fully digested by marketeers. So it's a mass customized brand. It's a brand that everybody has an association with it. There is a Suresh version of Maggie, and there is a Delshad version of Maggie, and everybody around has got their own Maggie. So obviously, Maggie is today, for us, it's a brand that, as you rightly said, went through some very, very difficult times. I'm glad to say that thanks to the consumers, thanks to the stakeholders, and thanks to the employees of the company, the brand has come back very strongly, and in fact, rode to greater heights during the pandemic. I think it was one of the most asked for brands and one of the most looked for brands. And also during this period, Delshad, the brand's ecosystem is much bigger than the brand Maggie itself. The number of wheat farmers who are involved, the number of flour making units, the wheat millers, the number of spice suppliers, the number of packaging suppliers, the number of vendors who actually sell Maggie across the country runs into hundreds and thousands, if not millions. So the footprint of the brand is very big and is really growing each day. We are market leaders by far. Enjoying good growth. I think that's the robustness of the brand. The strength comes from 3 platforms. Number 1 is innovation. I think we are innovating quite strongly in Maggie, and some of the variants of Maggie are doing extremely well. Number 2 is Maggie is now more digital than it ever was. I think in the last 2 years of the pandemic, the digital connect with the consumers, whether it is recipe searches or whether it is recipe provisions or whether it is the experiential part of Maggie, and really ensuring that consumers talk about Maggie, live Maggie in their lives. That has become a very important aspect of the brand. And the third thing is in terms of our sustainability initiatives on Maggie, a number of initiatives have been put through. You'll be happy to know, Darshad, that as a brand, we are We are plastic neutral for the last 2 years, which means that the amount of plastic that we use in the packaging of Maggi noodles is compensated by the amount of plastic that we collect and recycle in the environment. That's an important part. Sustainable farming for spices. We work across 5 states with almost 2 to 3,000 farmers working on sustainable agricultural practices in growing spices, and also the traceability of spices, so that the consumer knows and is absolutely safe, feels safe on the spices and on the ingredients that go to make Maggi. The third is we had an initiative during the pandemic called the Apna Food Business, which is really to incentivize and to encourage women entrepreneurs, either those who are making food online or really even offline, with programs in order to identify them, in order to train them, in order to provide seed capital. At the end of it all, 10,000 entrants came into this scheme, and about 10 of them were identified finally as the kind of winners of this particular initiative, and they were given a seed capital of 5 lakhs of rupees in order to start and in order to grow their business. So there are different initiatives on the Desh Ke Liye 2 minute campaign that we have run around sustainability, around the Apna Food business, and really trying to see how the ecosystem of Maggi can become even stronger and even more robust. And that is really the tribute that Maggi pays back to the consumers, whose custodians we are. In a sense, my only role as the managing director of the company is to be the custodian for brand Maggi, and it is going from strength to strength. And there are more initiatives on this that are going to follow as we go forward.
So Maggi is a much loved brand. It is a pantry staple for a lot of Indians. And so given the current climate and given everything, despite the challenges right now, what are you doing in terms of, say, your pricing strategies to sort of keep up with that customer expectation of Maggi? What are you doing? How are you navigating this piece of the challenge?
Look, it is definitely very challenging, Darshal, because Maggi is such a loved brand, and it is almost common staple in many homes across income strata. So therefore, that is something that we are very, very cognizant of. Typically, in a difficult situation as far as commodity inflation is concerned, there are 2 or 3 vectors that the company uses. The first one is because of the sheer scale of Maggi. There are economies of scale in terms of buying at the right time, stocking at the right time, and really ensuring that you try and minimize the input cost impact that you start feeling from one period to the other. Number one. Number two is we do have cost efficiency programs, almost contributing to 1 to 2% of sales. We call it shark savings, which is really operational savings, packaging savings, and other related savings. For example, on Maggi, in the last 2 to 3 years, almost 7 to 8% reduction in the amount of packing material that is being used has been put into effect. So there are efficiency parameters that we work on in order to reduce the cost. And only after 1 and 2, which is really the economies of scale and the efficiencies and effectiveness are not fully satisfied, do we touch pricing. So pricing is really only the third vector that we operationalize. But as I told you, the scale of the inflation has been rather stiff this year. I mean, 2019, 20, and 21 has been more than offset by the impact that we are facing in 2022. Fuel is up, wheat prices are up, spices prices are up, packaging prices are up, logistic prices are up. Almost every single element of the value chain has had a substantive increase in costs. So we are trying to do our best to ensure that we mitigate as best as is possible the impact that we are facing. And yet, I'm afraid we have had to, with deep regret, pass on some of the price increases to consumers as well.
Let me switch gears a little bit and talk to you about a really buzzing space, which is the D2C space right now. How do you see that panning out? What is Nestle's strategy in the D2C space? What are the opportunities that you're looking at? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Look, I think the D2C space is really becoming very interesting, though it's a very challenging space because you have to find a differentiator for the consumer experience between buying on a channel or buying on either organized trade or e-commerce or the general trade versus buying on a D2C platform. So the degree of differentiation really has to be quite acute and quite sharp in order for it to work. Secondly, I think D2C is becoming very attractive because consumers are now looking at brands as not just objects or products to be consumed, but they're also looking at it as a reflection of their own lifestyles. So whatever they are looking for in their lifestyles in terms of nutrition, health, wellness, advice, tips, etc., all of this and engagement, all of this has to get built in to a D2C platform. So as I speak to you, we clearly are working on a platform of this kind. And I believe that sooner than later we'll be making our foray into it. However, we just want to ensure that whatever experience we give, whether it is in terms of the payment platforms, the logistic platforms, the engagement platforms, the brands that are represented on D2C, all of these are robust enough and adequate enough to satisfy the most discerning consumers. Nestle would not like to put a half foot forward. We want to put a firm foot forward. And that is really the direction that we are working on.
I'm glad you mentioned discerning consumers because people are, of course, becoming more conscious about what they eat, how they live, the brands that they use. So how are you addressing this trend toward more healthier living? Because at the end of the day, Nestle is in the business of making foods and beverages that make us feel good. It's snacks and confectionery. So how are you dealing with this trend toward healthier living?
Look, I think, I've always believed, and that's the Nestle philosophy as well. There is nothing called good nutrition or bad nutrition. It's all about balancing nutrition. So too much of a piece of nutrition in excess can also cause you harm, as indeed the deficiency of good nutrition can also be harmful to consumers. So really, we're working on different vectors as far as our brands is concerned. One is in the pandemic, two or three trends we are seeing coming out very clearly. Number one is the consumers look for nutrition and immunity. I think these are two themes that were not necessarily important pre-pandemic and now have become important post-pandemic. Second is the preference for quality and the safety of the brand over any other parameter that they had in their consideration. I think this is becoming more and more important because consumers are wanting to buy safe choices and good quality choices. And the third bit is consumers are still seeking value. And because of the economic consequences of the pandemic, there are still a fair segment of consumers whose budgets are being stressed because of the difficulties that they are facing in their own lives. And therefore, they're looking at better value offerings that companies can give. So for us, the journey has been, number one is to improve the quality of the nutrition that we seek to offer, whether it is in Maggi or whether it is in Milks and Nutrition or in any other part of our portfolio, to really try and see that we are able to give better offerings, more healthier offerings, and also more relevant offerings as far as the consumer is concerned, number one. Looking at options, and we will be coming out with this reasonably soon in products that offer you healthy snacking, whether it is grain-based or whether it is protein-based. The whole area of plant-based proteins is becoming an additional source because, incidentally, Delshad, as you know very well, Indians are deficient in protein. So the question is one of adapting plant-based proteins into the Indian context and into the Indian cuisine relevance, rather than just lifting concepts from the West and putting it into India, and really looking at entries into areas that what we call healthy aging. As India grows more prosperous, and as our population growth rates decline, we also are becoming more of an aging population. I mean, the population above the age of 60 is gradually creeping up in this country quite substantially. And these are the people, incidentally, who also have the money in their pocket, because these are largely the baby boomer generation, are the ones who have earned reasonably well and have saved prudently in their lives. And therefore, they are looking at products now to keep them healthy and to keep them happy as they grow older. So these are a couple of areas that we certainly are looking at quite aggressively. We have, as you know, an R&D center here in India. It's a global R&D center, not a Nestle India center, but we have a good relationship with that center to be able to develop some of these products and really expand the nutrition and wellness bandwidth of the company as we move forward.
Let me ask you a bit of a personal question now. I've noticed that you are one of the most responsive CEOs on platforms like LinkedIn. And today we are seeing CEOs becoming voices of the company, they're social media influencers. Tell me, what's your approach to how you respond to employees, customers, colleagues on platforms like LinkedIn?
No, I think, Darshad, I don't mean it as a boast, but when I was a young manager, each one of us has a dream of what he would like to be known for. And one of the things that I dreamt, and I said, I hope I am this when I grow to be a more mature manager, is to be able to positively influence as many people as I possibly could. That was the only goal I had in my life, that let me influence people as positively as I can. Whatever happens to me is in the hands of God, my bosses, and probably whatever little hard work that I do. And therefore, I'm not very much of a social media person. LinkedIn is the only thing that I do, and I do that reasonably regularly. And one of the things that always kind of rankles me, if I am a 23-year-old and I'm writing to someone with a request, and that person does not even have the courtesy to reply me back, simply because he's sitting on a high horse of being the chairman of a company or whatever, is the director of a company or whatever position he's in. I think it is basic human courtesy. To me, it is just respect. And I genuinely feel extremely happy when my own people, when other young people achieve something in their lives, because the only legacy that I will ever leave behind as a corporate leader is to have created leaders who are far better than me, far more competent than me, and far more capable of handling an environment that is increasingly going to be more turbulent, more difficult, and more unpredictable. So in that context, I believe that I should find the time, and I try most often. Sometimes I don't, and my apologies for those who have not received my replies in time. But I really think that nurturing the young and giving them a few examples of what they could emulate in their lives or what they could even consider as perspectives in their lives is important. And therefore, I not only I'm on LinkedIn, but I go to some campuses. I do talk to students, either for graduation day or for whatever event that is there. It is just a way of sharing. I can't give knowledge to them. I'm not a professor. I'm not a tech person. I'm not the kind of guy who has got a whole amount of specialist wisdom coming out of me. What I can share with them is the robustness of perspectives and the introspection of a lifetime in order to offer them more hope and probably some examples of what they could look at for themselves for the future.